All right, you lucky ducks, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to the session with Justin Zimmerman. Let me tell you a little about Justin, all right? Justin has a very in-depth and unique perspective on the industry, all right? He's been in the game for over 14 years working with and serving real estate agents. For about 10 of those years, he was at CDPE, which was the fastest growing designation during the hard times in real estate, the last dark ages of real estate that we went through. There, he was part of training over 40,000 agents and helping them to figure out how to grow their business, figuring them how to make the most of the opportunities that were available at that point in time. And he's also worked with a lot of other platforms that serve, coach, and teach agents. Okay, now he's at the RedX. You've probably heard of that company before, theredx.com. And he's kind of jokingly referred to as the Chief Research Officer. And the reason is because taking what he's done for the last 14 years, what he really does is he focuses on what drives success consistently and predictably, as sure as the sun rising and setting, for real estate agents across the board. Looking back over the last 14 years and counting of his work in the industry, right? 40,000 agents trained through CDPE, thousands of agents impacted through other platforms, and now here at the RedX. And the cool thing about being at the RedX for Justin is he gets to see the behind the scenes and the back end of many, many, many real estate agents' businesses. The key thing here is he sees the back end of agents' businesses who succeed and who fail. And he gets to see the distinction between the two. And so what we're going to be talking about today and what Justin has been able to create for us today is basically what he calls 9 career killers. Okay. And the way he described it to me is he goes, Andre, if an agent ignores these, the market will ignore them. I thought that was such an interesting sound bite, so juicy. So we're now today, what Justin is going to do is he's going to share 9 specific career killers with us that if you observe them, and if you use them properly, you're going to grow your business. He sees this is happening consistently for all agents. If you ignore them, don't observe them consistently, it kills real estate agents' businesses. Justin, welcome to the Get Listing Summit.
Hey, yeah, thank you so much. I mean, I wish I could take you everywhere I go, and before I enter into a room or meet people, I would have you kind of stand in front of them and do that spiel. I feel honored and well spoken about, so thank you.
Awesome. Well, it is recorded, so if you want, you can just take that clip and put it into your highlight reel, your intro reel when you go to your next stage, right? You can just take that little bit. They just see a big bearded guy, talking about you. Hey, before we jump into the 9 career killers, you're on day 121 of running.
Yep, that's right. Yeah.
How's that going?
It's I didn't start off with a goal. I just started running like Forrest Gump, right? He just started running. I don't want to compare myself necessarily. Well, there's a lot of beautiful things about that story.
Sure. What got you into it? Why'd you decide to start doing it? You just wanted to start doing something new consistently?
Yeah, I've always had this drive to find discipline, and I've always been not disciplined at finding discipline. And I just reached a point in my life, there were things at work and at home, and I realized that there's so many variables that I can't control. I just kind of got to a point of frustration. But the one variable I can control is my health and my mindset. And that's not even like a switch. It's just like I just started running, and eventually through the hustle and the grind, I gained control over the voices in my head that told me I can't, I shouldn't, negative self-talk. This is it, you're not going to reach these things and these things that you want in your life. And so just through, I would call it an access point, I realized that there's this principle of apply daily discipline that, funny enough, is essentially the same thing, whether it's running and receiving results from consistent work. And then the work that I do at RedX to observe and see who succeeds and who doesn't. And that differentiator between the two of them is essentially apply daily discipline in a number of areas that we're going to talk about today. So I know, I can't speak to being a top agent, top prospector, a big time person who's tactically taken on the market and produced lots of results, but I can speak to my own area applying this principle. And so I'm not going to get really into my own health and transformation, but behind the scenes, as you hear me talk, know that that this principle is supporting me as an individual, but also it's like the superstructure for success of all the people who make it at RedX, that stay with our company for years and years and years and years and years. And then the difference between those who sign up and actually the first one I'm going to get into when we get into it, why they sign up and they quickly cancel. So.
Gotcha. Well, with that, by the way, congratulations on sticking it for 121 days and counting.
Yeah.
So,
Thank you. Thank you.
Next year, we're going to have you back on the summit, and you're going to be what? About 500 days into it and counting?
Yeah, I have no intention of stopping. It's become a thing that's supported my health, my mindset, and you know, I'll make one more point about it, and I think it's a good transition to talking about real estate. Is that the saying I say to myself is that truly, what are circumstances beyond your control, right? And so people are like, how long are you going to run for? Until I can't. And the can't is until I encounter circumstances beyond my control. And in real estate, I think people make excuses why they can't prospect, why they can't do the things that are like just like exercise. And we know how simple it is, but yet we don't do it. We make excuses why we can't pick up the phone. You know, this happens and this happens. We'll get into that. And so it's really allowed me to examine what circumstances beyond my control really mean. And I've gotten sick, went for a run. It was below zero and freezing, went out for a run. We had a move and pack over the course of a weekend, still went out and ran. We had a pollution alert and I had to drive up to the mountains, still went out and ran. I could just go on and on and on. And each one of those could have been a moment where I'm like, and my mind said that. And I'm like, okay, mind, is this beyond my control? And the answer was no. And so now here I am 121 days later. And like you said, next year at this time, you know, if circumstances remain within my control, we'll be talking about 500 days. And so I think that's just like the perfect principle applied to why agents succeed and why they fail, is that they accept excuses when those excuses are actually within their control.
Is that one of the 9 things?
The first one, it's that one kind of blends into a couple.
By the way, say that again. They accept it. Say that again.
People accept excuses when in reality the circumstances are within their control. They can do something about it.
Got it. Let me write that down. Accept excuses when in reality circumstances are in their control.
I call them excuses. Like I've come up with excuses to excuse the excuses. It's a funny thing, but I'm like, nope, that was hard and I overcame that. So no, that's not a valid excuse why I can't run today. Or this happened and then I did that anyways. And so that's an excuse that I don't have to listen to either, and so it's just like you train your mind. There's a guy who's become really popular, David Goggins. A lot of people,
Can't Hurt Me. Got his book.
Hashtag Can't Hurt Me. And so I watched a couple of his podcasts a while ago. And he's been part of the inspiration why when I first started running again. He talks about his cookie jar. And so when he said that, I'm like, oh, those are like my excuses. You know, he was in SEAL training and, some crazy thing happened. And so when he's out on the road later, he's like, yeah, there's no reason why I can't do that, because he's got this like cookie jar of like suffering moments that were gruelingly difficult that he overcame. And so now that he has that in his mind, there's no reason why in this present moment, this circumstance he's in is actually harder or more difficult than the ones he's overcome. And so I just think there's like prospecting and becoming an agent is just picking up the phone and encountering the grind and coming up with excuses or cookie jar moments where you're just like, yeah, that doesn't faze me anymore. Or hashtag can't hurt me. Maybe you and I can come up with the real estate equivalent, right? Like,
okay.
Can't faze me, can't scare me, can't reject me. I don't know, something like that.
Gotcha. Makes sense. By the way, the book that Justin's referring to is Can't Hurt Me here by David Goggins. All right. 9 career killers. Let's start from the top, my friend.
Yeah. So the first one I've got here pick up my little notebook. I wrote it down. And I would say the first one is false expectations of results and the amount of work required to achieve those results. And so I routinely meet with the team lead who manages our customer support team and billing team. And I ask them what's going on, what are the reasons why people are canceling. And it's a lot of times, but there's a huge, I don't have the most recent report in front of me, but I think it's close to 2/3. The response is prospecting is just too hard. People sign up, they think they're going to make a call. The first call is going to be picked up. And then all of a sudden they're like, yes, come and list my house. And, boom, like that's it. And I think that's what people want. But I think, and that's an oversimplification of like the lack of expectations or false expectations. But I mean, we can talk about Gary Vee. I mean, I'm sure if you're a Dave Goggins fan and a Joe Rogan fan, you're also a Gary Vee fan.
Mm-hmm.
And for people who are listening to this, they are probably too, in that the time frame that you expect results to happen often isn't your own timeline. And that, the equivalent is trusting the process and loving the process and waiting for the results. And so, do you really know how many calls it's going to take before you get a contact? Do you know how many contacts it's going to take before you get a listing appointment? Do you know how many listing appointments it's going to take before you get a listing, and so on? And so I don't think I think if people overanalyze that, then that can slow them down. But having the false expectation that prospecting is going to be easy is and coming into it without the support systems behind it is the number one reason why people try Red X, people try prospecting, people try expireds, people try for sale by owners, is because they're coming in not realizing the training and discipline it's going to take day after day, week after week, until you can't hurt me, to then all of a sudden realize that, and people are going to be mean to me, and how are you going to handle that rejection? And so they don't have a resiliency, they don't have the expectations, and they don't have the timeline in their mind. They haven't given them enough runway to really take off with it. And so the expectations of time and timeline are essentially the same. And it's going to be different per person. I think there are people who come in and, one of my favorite people from a couple of years ago, Edward Estrada, was just like, he was a Marine. So I think that helped out, right? He came into this with discipline and just grounded out. And in 3 months, he turned his life and career around. And so if you have that discipline, I think a 3-month window of saying, I'm going to hustle and make this happen is totally legitimate. But for others who are coming from like an education background, or they're teachers, transitioning into the business, bartenders, I think they need to have they have a different mindset that needs to adapt to essentially the numbers game that is behind the expectations that eventually transition from false to, oh, I get it.
Yeah, because you just see these big commission dollar amounts that you can earn 3% of 500,000 or whatever, and you're like, oh man, I'm going to be a millionaire in a few months. And when you don't have any deals in 3 months, but you've maybe only prospected cumulatively over 3 months for 5 hours, no surprise.
How many calls are you making? Like that, I want to ask you, because I haven't watched all of the interviews that you've done. I know you've done tons of them, and I'm sure there's some stories you can plug into this and support it. And I'd love to hear some of those, because I don't want to be the only voice that's saying this, at least right now. If someone else is listening to this and I'm the only one that they're hearing, I think if you could jump in there and the stories and, I guess tactics other people have shared around this would be, I think, super helpful.
Yeah, I think that, a lot of the top performing team leaders, I'd say, like the people that come off the top of my head are Scott Tremblay, Kerry Shull, Jeff Cohn. I think they're all doing like north of 400 deals a year as a team, and there's others, but they all know their numbers for sure. So like Jeff Cohn, their numbers are, they know that it takes 150 phone calls to get one executed contract. So 150 phone calls out, right, to get one executed deal. And that executed deal is going to happen. That's the other key, is it's not going to happen right now. It'll happen between now and the next 6 months.
Right.
Right. So now think about that volume. That just exploded in volume, right? Like, so it's 150 phone calls on average to get one executed deal, but that executed deal happens between now and 6 months on average.
Yeah.
So you're doing 150 contacts a day. If you're not, you're doing 75 contacts a day for 2 days to basically stack the deck to say that consistently, if I do 75 contacts today and tomorrow between these 2 days of prospecting, whatever version of prospecting that is, right? Which you're trying to contact people on the phone. When I say version, I mean cold leads, sphere of influence, whatever, right? But the point is that basically then if somebody calls for 2 days and gets 75, tries to attempt 75 contacts, 2 days of that effort is going to mean an executed deal in the next 6 months.
Yeah, I love that. I never thought about it that way before. Is that you disconnect the, like, it's not that one call or that one contact equals that one deal. It's like the sum of all of those things downstream, right? You need to do these actions to get these things, and somewhere in the middle, that transition.
Yeah. And everybody will tell you it's a 90-day window. What you're getting paid on today is what you did 90 days ago. So if you're not making money right now, literally go look at your calendar and Google Calendar 3 months back and ask yourself, what the beep was I doing back then? And if you're honest with yourself, because it's a lot harder to lie to yourself than to others, and you can't lie to yourself about something that obvious. You can go back 3 months, look at your calendar, and be like, oh, that's why. That's another thing I've heard is, all the top performers, they schedule their actual like prospecting time into the calendar. Like it's actually scheduled in.
Yeah. So you're helping me make the next point I've noticed on the 9 career killers, which is those who don't have a routine are the ones who end up quitting the business, and which is right. Like the other side of what you're saying is top performers have a routine, and underperformers and let's just call them people who drop out of the business don't have a routine, and they don't stick to it consistently. Because you can have a routine, you can write it down on the wall behind me. There it is. Look, there's my routine.
Right.
But you got to do it.
Right.
Yeah,
they say, yeah, that's exactly right. On all the teams, they're very, very like Scott Tremblay. I mean, that's an interview that's so dense because they have so many operations thing. He was introducing me as an operations machine, and they have these like routines and processes for everybody, and they know exactly what role, what you have to do, and when you're going to hit your target. And so like the average agent that actually sticks in the business does what, 6 deals a year, something like that, 5 deals a year, maybe. Their average agent does 36 deals a year, right? So it's exponentially larger than above the average. And it all comes down to their processes and operations, their routines.
I mean, depending on where you live, most places you can't live off of 6 deals. Yeah, anywhere in the country, you can live off of 36.
Yes. Yeah. What's number 3? So 1 is false expectations of results and the work required to get those results. 2 is if you don't have a routine, those who don't have a routine end up being the ones who most likely to quit. What's number 3?
I just want to throw a little something into the routines, because that's if I look at one of the most downloaded pieces of content or types of content that we have at RedX. Again, I kind of have a behind the scenes view of like when we put out content, what's the most popular stuff. People love all the different types of routines that different agents that we publish, we put out there. And so like, it's usually structured. I mean, I want to kind of cover the, if the career killer is no routine. So then if you don't want to drop out of the business, then what does a good routine look like? 1, you can go to RedX and our blog and check that out. But 2, I mean, there's kind of this overlap amongst most of the top prospectors and agents, which is they're in their office and prospecting no later than 8 a.m. And then there is a self-care, motivation, mindset, exercise, food, positivity, role play combination, not all of them in all the times in the period of time before 8 a.m. So, I mean, again, that's not 100% across the board.
Sure, but consistently blended.
But, it's hard for me to ignore, and it would be remissive of me to not mention that there's a 2-hour period of time from 6 to 8. Most top prospectors who use RedX follow and do. And then they have what we call the lead stack going forward. And lead stack is just a term I've adapted from, in the developer world, you have your stack of operating systems essentially that run your business. And so you have your dev stack. Well, I go, Well, real estate agents, what do they have? They have their lead stack. And so that would just be like you do new expireds first, and then you do old expire second, and then you do your FISBOs. And so every agent's lead stack is going to be different by their market and their skill level. But essentially they set up their lead stack and then go through that, building that into their routine, playing around with optimizing it, because sometimes depending on the time of year or the market conditions, you're going to want to do one in a different order. And I can't speak to all those variables, but essentially, if you're listening to this, you can ask people in your market, or of your hunch and gut check on what is the best order.
Right.
And then I guess my last point on that, some of them actually also have a secondary afternoon prospecting session if they don't hit their contact goals for the day. So, you were talking about hitting 75. A lot of agents we talk to, 50 is their goal. 50 to 75 is their contact goal, meaning they just talked to someone and had a bona fide conversation about buying or selling. And again, there's some different ways to define that.
It's interesting. Yeah, Scott Tremblay's team is 200 calls a day. I think it's minimum of 10 contacts a day they have to hit, and I think two new clients or 2 new appointments or something like that. It's a monster machine. Like, it's no joke.
And I'm just speaking on the individual level, right? So
No, I know you are, but like, I'm just for comparison for people listening. It's like, you know what I mean. 50 contacts made, whether they pick up the phone or not, is not that hard to get. You just need to stop making excuses.
Yeah.
Right. Contact can be, they don't necessarily talk to you, but you made a contact, right? You left a voicemail, something.
And then depending on whose philosophy of prospecting you follow, the definition of a contact can change.
Yeah.
People say you have to have a conversation with someone.
That's true. You're right.
So, yeah. Again, I'm not in the super tactical role of like really defining that. And if you're lying to yourself, like you said,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like, if you're just trying to put checks in the box and you're like not truly being honest with how you feel, like when I go run, like, did I run 2 miles or did I run 1.95?
Right.
Right. If my daily goal is 3 miles and I run 2.97, is that 3 miles? No. Right. And I just, the definition and how stringent you want to be about it is up to whatever standard you're trying to set for yourself.
That makes sense. All right. What's point number 3?
Point number 3 is physical space. Interesting enough, physical space is a huge thing. I'm working from home today. I have an office in Red X, and I'm actually applying that principle right now. I love it. I just realized I'm doing that right. And I didn't realize I was doing it until I just thought of it and I'm talking to you. And so the office, in most people's offices, has lots of people doing lots of different things that are usually not all in line at the same time, right? And so an office is a great place to go because it gets you out of the house. And I think there's something to leaving one space and transitioning to the other because, bedroom, that's where I sleep. Kitchen, that's where I eat. Office is where I work. But when you go to your physical office, there's a lot of distractions there. And I'm not advocating for home office or not. I'm just really just trying to talk about physical space. Is that what I've recognized is whether it's a separate space at an office that they go to or a separate space in their house. Like I have my desk right here, but if I had another desk behind this desk, this might be my operations admin desk. And that behind me might be what I'm going to get to next is a lot of top prospectors have a dedicated prospecting space. It's simple, it's clear, it's set up, it has their vision board in front of it, has their scripts in front of it. It's like, if you're on a big giant boat, each little station in the boat has its like array of things that's designed to do a certain thing. And so your office essentially could be at your home or at your office, but like the space, which could be inside the same space, is dedicated to one particular action. And in this case, a lot of top prospectors have a dedicated space for prospecting that is set up, ready to go, command and control. When I'm in this space, like entering the dojo, let's do this.
I like that. Never thought about that. That makes sense. How that could have like a strong impact on you, right? And like a pull. Yeah. And you don't have to get ready to get ready. And you don't have to set things up. It's just show up and go.
I bet that's another excuse, right? When you set that up. And so I think people are like, oh, the extra step of setting it up and like their mind just like one more thing I need to do. And sometimes it's just those small little things that like stop us from taking that next step. Like, I've got to drive to the gym.
Right,
right?
right, right.
I'll go, but and you'll probably hear a lot of people say that. I remember when I used to go to the gym, was like, as long as I got there, I was ready to go. But getting there, getting in the car,
Yeah.
getting ready, the pre workout was the hardest part.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's essentially like, and that's why I like running. Actually, just a little side note is there are no excuses. There's your shoes, there's the door, that's it. And
Right.
having the space in your office at home or another space at your brokerage dedicated to just that eliminates the setup and reconfiguration. And the mind wants you to be lazy, I
Mm-hmm. I can agree with that. All right. What's point number 4?
think. Scripts and practicing. I'm sure everyone's heard this 1,000 times, and I'm not saying anything new or different. Allow me just to reiterate this, is that I think another reason why agents make excuses is before they pick up the phone, they're terrified of not knowing what to say, sounding stupid, and that self-criticism and judgment. And if you don't have that inner critic, I think you can just pick up the phone and just like say, "Hey, what's up?" Like Greg McDaniels, that guy is amazing. Like he doesn't need necessarily a script, although he follows
Right.
some things. But when you watch his live prospecting, he's just so casual, laid back, and like he's following a little bit of a script, but he's following it in his own way. And so, but I think for people who have a lot of judgment about themselves and the fear of getting yelled at, that I think a script is like that Dumbo's feather that's going to give them the confidence at least to know what to say, to the point where the sting doesn't hurt as much if they do it enough. And so scripts and practicing scripts, and there's RedX has I think a 26-page script book we give away for free. So if you go to our blog, I think signing up for it afterwards, you do get it emailed to you as part of just joining our blog. And so we have a script for every lead type. So yeah, expireds, FISBOs, pre-foreclosures, I can go all down the list of all those things, but yeah. And so like
Awesome.
having a script, and just like, if you just say these things and you just take away the judgment and let your mouth talk as you pick up the phone, it's going to work for you and you're going to get more comfortable with it.
Do you have any insights or practices that you've seen with agents that are able to turn prospecting into some sort of a game or something like that, where it's like,
Yeah.
just, I don't know, see it as an opportunity to practice a script, like same as like going to a basketball court and throwing 100 free throws. It's like, do you get rejected? Do you feel, rejected by the hoop when you throw the basketball up and it misses? No, you just take the basketball and throw it again, right? And it's the throwing it over and over and over and over and over and over again that you get better at putting the ball through the hoop. Have you seen any sort of like little, even anecdotal, but better yet, if you've seen a pattern of some way of turning it into a game or some sort of a fun practice? So it's like,
Yeah.
because your energy is going to reflect how you're approaching it, right?
Well, I need to ask you, are you setting me up here to give you the answer? Did you happen to know that we have something like this available, or is this
No,
just coincidental?
I
Okay.
did not know. No, this is a natural question, because I know that in life, if you can remove the fear from something, or downgrade the intensity
Yeah.
of perception of something, the negative perception of something, you'll be more likely to implement it or take action on it.
Yeah, I've got two solutions to it that speak for themselves. So all I have to do in this case is mention them, and then anybody watching can then go consume them. One of our most recent posts, actually, we got 2 pieces of content we just produced that covers this exactly. And so we've got what are the 11 habits of highly effective agents, and in there is the gamification of your daily routine. And so we have a bingo card that you can go download and take and print out, that essentially you earn points for encountering negativity, right? You get hung up on, bingo, there's a point, right? So we got a card that we designed that kind of covers a lot of the most common negative interactions and positive ones when prospecting. And so go download that. If you just go to the RedX blog, it should be, at least right now, if you're listening to this as it's live or recently published, or just look up, or just actually Google 11 habits of highly effective agents, RedX. That should bring it up. And then also on that page, there's a link to an interview at the top with a coach who, like, we interviewed, came to RedX, and he explains a lot of this stuff in that interview. So you can actually read the interview. There's also and then you can also listen to some things related to it as well. So that's going to give everyone who wants to know about that far more information than I can possibly handle and deliver at this time.
Okay. Very awesome. Well, I'm happy I asked that question. All
Yeah.
right. What's are we done there? Or do you want to move on to number five?
I would only add to the scripts part that this next one kind of blends into the scripts. Like, use a script, get comfortable with script, right? Take the shots, know how to shoot, But then also finding a practice partner ties into the next one, which is people who fail out of the business don't have accountability partners that they build into keeping them committed to their routine and their scripts. And this comes from that interview I mentioned before, just a couple of seconds ago on the 11 Habits of Highly Effective Real Estate Agents. Is that a lot of agents are isolated and bored, right? And so, of course, right, if you create this space that's dedicated just to prospecting, you're following this routine, and you're a solo agent, especially, right? Like, you're encountering the grind every day. You're going to get bored, burnt out, and drained. And so one of the most important things is when you find an accountability partner, they bring access to humanity, right? You're still a human, right? Even though there's all these routines. And so practicing your scripts with a role play partner makes it fun, helps get you sharp before getting on the calls. And then, I've heard of people just firing up like a bunch of Google Hangouts and people prospecting together just to have a sense of camaraderie. And
Mm-hmm.
so, whatever, just find a way to stay connected. And when you encounter bumps along the way, you're not alone in trying to deal with the inevitable and negative interactions.
Yeah, I think that especially I think that's a very astute point, Justin, because I think that what you're seeing a lot in the industry is brokerages, and I'll take it for example, just like one like EXP, a completely virtual model,
Right.
right? And there's beauty to that. There's advantages to that model, right? Like every single thing has an advantage and a disadvantage, right? Strength and weakness. So there's strengths to that and there's advantages to that. But one of the weaknesses, to your point, is that isolation, right? As an agent. And so then you can really get yourself into some, I think, mental ruts and some unempowering thought
Thoughts.
patterns and
Yep.
thought habits, right? Very disempowering thought patterns, habits. And the only thing that can snap you out of it is other people. That energy, right?
Yeah.
Oh, okay. I see how other people are taking this. Okay, well, yeah, I'm off. Like, oh, this is not a problem. I can totally conquer this. Or, okay, I need to make these changes. Okay, I get it. That's why, like, when people go to a conference or a summit or some sort, in the real estate industry, they come after 3 days, after 2, 3 days of the weekend, at some conference, they're all just like fired up. I don't think it's just the content that you heard. I think it's also just being around other people who are like dealing with the same bullshit and
Yep.
pain,
Yep.
right? And they know your pain. And there's this common, like, you get what I'm going through every day because you're shoveling the same shit, right?
Yeah.
Also, the victories are best understood amongst each other as a
Yeah.
tribe. I
Yeah.
get that victory because I know how hard you worked for it, right? That somebody outside of real estate wouldn't understand. And then, like you're saying, this accountability, whether it's intentional or even playful and just by default, right? Like, if you have 2, 3 good real estate friends and you're getting together face to face, say once a week for lunch or dinner or something, by default, there's going to be some just default accountability there because you're going to be talking together, like, like even if it's like jokingly, and I'm saying this jokingly, but like even as an emotional support group, right?
Hey.
Through
Yes.
that
Yeah.
through that process, there's some accountability by default, even if it's not intentional. Like, hey, let's keep each other accountable. So I think that's a really, really strong point. I want to seize on that. I just wanted to seize on that for a second and
Yeah.
highlight it because we're social creatures.
Yep.
Also, real estate agents are sales people. You sell to people, you sell with people, right? It's all about people. But I think so often we get isolated ourselves in our tribe as real estate agents, right? And it's not healthy.
Yeah. I mean, I'll vote for renaming no accountability to no emotional support group.
Mm. Yeah, no, I get it. That's definitely. I get what you're saying there.
Yeah. So yeah,
I'm
that I
writing it
mean,
down.
fun, accountability, it all kind of ties together. And then I wasn't trying to do this on purpose, but I think to elaborate and expand, to give people listening to this like further resources to dive into it. Again, these are the things I've spent my time at RedX researching, writing, discovering, and sharing. And so each one of these comes from a place of not just like extemporaneously hearsay, but like we've created resources to then help solve these problems. And so if you go to, again, our blog, which is a place where we put a lot of these things, we have a resource on where to find role play partners. And so if we just go to theredx.com/blog, go through, I don't know, like maybe just go through the archives of them, and you'll see, or Google, RedX role play. We researched all the best places to go find role play partners, and given little snippets and bits of copy that you can just copy and paste into those places to ask for help and support.
Awesome. All right. What's point number 6?
Number 6 is no platform. And so one of the funniest things we see come back as a differentiator between those who succeed and those who don't, is when we ask them something along the lines of, what CRM do you use? And then, some people will give us, Vortex, which is the name of our CRM, if you want to call it that, some of our competitors' names, some of the platforms that, like Top Producer. And then we'll also see who are like my iPhone, my contacts list, my Excel spreadsheet, right? And so I'm not saying you can't come up with a good system to keep clear who you're going to focus on today, who you need to follow up with tomorrow, and what's the disposition or notes that need to be conversed on. And I'm not saying you can't do it with like a huge sticky note board behind you. But there's the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule, the 80-20 rule. And if you do that enough times, I'm sure it gets down to like anybody you're talking to at one moment in time, there's like 1% to 0.5% of the people who are ready, willing, and able to do business with you. And you need to get clear. I mean, that's part of the job of prospecting. And then the people who are like, not today or in the next 30 days, how do you keep like a simple system of follow-up of hot and ready business, ready to go, and things that are maybes and later to follow up on. And so platform is a huge aspect of focus. And a lot of platforms come pre-built with like the heuristic, if you want to use that word, of like what to put your attention on. And so most of the people we interview have a platform. Now, of course, I'm biased because most of the people we interview are customers, and most of those people are using our product, and most people that have our product are using Vortex. And, right. But what we do notice that, like, essentially, and I don't care who you use, I mean, in this conversation, I'm not trying to sell anything other than the best practices, success, and that type of stuff. But your platform should at the very least have like clear dispositions on where a particular lead is at in the journey from, closed or trashed. And then an extension of that is also top prospectors use dialers. And again, whether they use the RedX Storm dialer or our competitors' dialers, it just drastically speeds up the velocity of the number of contacts that you can have on a day-to-day basis, and removes the excuse of, oh, I've got to dial that 10-digit number every single time. It just, you load your lead list in, you press start, and it dials them sequentially. Hello, and then it puts you on the treadmill of focus, which goes back to somewhat of your physical space. And so a dialer tied to a platform with the right simple set of dispositions, I mean, that's like, when I talked before about having a desk behind my desk dedicated to prospecting, that would be the only window up on that screen for that agent who's, making it happen. And so.
Okay. I like it. Number 7.
This is I think this is one of the most important ones, actually. I think the next two are the most important ones of all. Is no vision, like having a vision, and something that's more than just survival and money, although that can be great motivators in the beginning. And I'm not a religious person, but I do like spirituality. And when I hear truth, it feels great. And someone mentioned to me, like, someone can correct this quote if it's wrong, but people perish without a vision.
Yeah. My people perish for lack of vision. I think that's Hosea 4:6, if I remember Sunday school.
Yeah, I heard it, I liked it, and it makes absolute sense to me. And, I've seen with the agents who succeed and those who don't, and and I'm saying you can structure your vision however you want, and it doesn't have to be like a forever vision. I've
Hmm.
seen I've seen just like temporary visions, right? Of agents putting up like a picture of like the house they grew up in that was in the ghetto, and they're like, I'm never going back there. Or like, um, you know, sad situations, and they'll put a quote that reminds them that they're going to die and that, life is short and you need to take action and live it to your fullest. And then there's the, I think, more popular versions of like the helicopters, the cars, the Ferraris, right? And so
Right, right,
pain or
right.
pleasure, pick which one ever really motivates you the most for wherever you are in your life. Because when you look up at that, oh, here's a great one. So one of our prospectors from back in the day told me how a friend of his from Mexico moved here and started working real estate. And he's like, do you know what my options and choices were? And he said, like, in a thick Spanish accent, he goes, do you know what's easier? Picking up the phone versus digging ditches and picking fruit. And he
Mm,
goes, that's hard work, right? And
yeah.
so I'm like, he's like, I don't want to go back to that. This is easier than that. And so like your perspective on where you came from, I just thought, like, you know, what a great like mindset in that sense, which is why I think having the never going back version of the vision is a great startup motivator.
Yeah, I can totally see that. Kind of like, another way maybe to use that is, what are you sick and tired of what are you sick and tired of being sick and tired about or of, right? And what are you going to change? What needs to change, right?
And some people put pictures up of like their kids, right? Like,
Yeah.
I want my kids to go to college. I want my kids to have a nice life. I don't want my kids to go hungry.
Well, I think the way you get leverage on yourself is to create a positive picture of where you want to go, and also paint an intense negative picture of where you don't want to go, and ask yourself if your actions, habits, right, and what you're doing consistently, what direction is it taking you?
Yeah, I think you could easily translate that into, again, talking about that. That's why I think that physical space that we just talked about on the other side of my desk here, which is, again, just, conversationally created here, is on that space for your prospecting station. You have one kind of little vision board or picture says things I want and then things I don't want. And then you're
Hmm.
right in front of you. And if you were to do that exercise, you'd look at that like, oh, I want this. Woo, that lifts me up. And like, I don't want that.
Right.
Yeah, and then that really ties into number 8, which is you have to have a vision, and but then there's also like the mindset of it. And so I think the exercise, again, I think talking about like tying this back to routines, is you can go draw a routine on your wall and have like it perfectly from 8 to 8:30 this and 9 to da da da, and like you have your routine, but then it's the execution of that routine that really matters, and the consistency of that execution daily. And so I think the blend here for this next number 7 and 8 kind of fit together in the same way, is you need to have a vision, but then you need to have your mindset. So you can write your vision down and that's done. It's super clear. But then I know myself and others that I call it, they call it a bad day backup plan, right? Like you're just
Okay.
gonna have bad days. Your mindset's going to be bad. The weather's going to change. It just, most people are human, and their emotions fluctuate. And so, we already talked about the excuses,
Hmm.
but there's another concept that this is my language and interpretation, just to make it a little bit more condensed, but essentially represents the actions and behaviors of the majority of people who stay with Red X and have long-term careers in real estate. Is that they have what I call mental mentors, and the habit of having a consistent daily built into their routine, and then especially as part of the bad day backup plan, like, I don't feel like doing this today. I feel slow. I feel sluggish. I feel tired. I'm a little anxious. I'm a little, like, we all have those emotions. And so when the story inside of their head is telling them things aren't great, they have enough self-awareness to then say, okay, I cannot listen to the voice in my head right now. Flip that switch, warning light on, evasive action, backup plan, initiate. And they have like a playlist, a Google, a YouTube video list, a set of podcasts, something that they put on their head and they immerse themselves in like something that they can listen to that and help reframe their day. And maybe it brings them all the way back. Maybe it brings them to 50%, but at least they've like had the self-awareness to shift their mindset to something else. And then on the days where they're happy and good, they're also listening to that as well, but they're even more intently aware of it when they're having in need of a bad day backup plan. And so like mindset and positivity sounds like, you know, a cheerleading club. And I think it's gained its value more and more in the last couple of years. But essentially without a positive mindset, you're just not going to get on the phone. Or when you do get on the phone, like if your energy's terrible, what kind of results can you expect?
Right. Yeah. We're all going to have bad days.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And especially like, I've noticed that like when I make a commitment to something new, like right now, this morning was day 61 unbroken of Miracle Morning.
Ooh.
So putting in that time, putting in that grind. And I love writing in, you know, the day and the date. So day 61, 3/29/19, right? And I did this Miracle Morning practice a few years back for over 90 days unbroken. And it created so much impact and change in my life, right? Because I think there's this principle that I noodle with called keystone habits, right?
Mm-hmm.
And like, what are those little keystone linchpin? Is another way to think of it. Seth Godin likes the word linchpin. Force multipliers, right? Like, you know, 80-20, but you get the idea. It's like these little key things you can do that have these big compounded ramifications and effect throughout your life. And I did this for over 90 days a few years back. Made a lot of change, made a lot of progress in my life.
Like what? I know it might dive in a little too much on
No, it's fine.
but I think
I became more open to the idea of practicing gratitude. This might be interesting and odd to hear, but I was doing the Miracle Morning, and you know, I would always hear about things like, oh, you got to be grateful. You got to have a gratitude practice on podcasts, because I was a big podcast listener for years before doing that. So let's say that I did a Miracle Morning for 90 days unbroken 3 years ago. It was about 3-4 years ago. Before that, for 3, 4, 5 years, I was and still am a podcast junkie, personal development junkie. One thing, you know, junkie, you know, but one topic up to that point in time that I had never really worked on was gratitude. So I'm like 60 days, actually just about this time. No, it was actually 30 days, about 30 days into my Miracle Morning. And I came across this new friend, and this new friend told me about this book called The Magic. It's a gratitude practice. It's a 28-day intentional gratitude practice. I still have that book. So I was like, okay, I'll add that. So I started doing the Miracle. So I kept doing the Miracle Morning, and then I added on the Magic, the gratitude practice. It's a daily writing practice, and it's a new assignment for 28 days, you know, for each individual day. So I would literally be investing in my personal development for about an hour and 45 minutes every morning, because the Miracle Morning is an hour. You can do a half-hour version too if like something's going on, but you still want to get it in and get that rep in honestly. You know, get that rep in. That's a workout word. Get that rep in honestly. You can do a half hour, but my rule is never have more than 3 days in a row that are 30-minute Miracle Mornings. So never do more than 3 days in a row where it's 30 minutes, because the hour is is where the juice is.
I know the standard. Eventually, your standard lowers, and then you accept that standard.
Yeah. So never more than 3 days. I don't care if I have to wake up at 3:30 in the freaking morning, but it's going to be a full hour, right? So that's one of my rules. But I added on the gratitude practice, started doing that. So then that took me about 45 minutes on average. Like the first day is fast, and the second, third day it compounds, and you're like, oh my God, I kept it up. I stuck to it. So where I'm going to go, the punchline, all this, the crescendo might be anticlimactic for you and most people, but for me, it was incredibly dramatic. After the 90-day period, I'm like day 96, 97, I get in my car and I'm taking a road trip from Middle Georgia down to Miami, Florida. All right. So it's going to be a long drive. And I'm like, I did the 28-day gratitude practice now 2 times in a row, 2 28-day cycles back to back, because I just kept repeating it while doing my Miracle Morning. Right. Get on the road. Now I'm a person who like used to drive, like when I was younger, late teen years, early 20s. I'm the guy that would drive with a baseball bat in my car. So if there was road rage, I'd get out with the baseball bat, and I could be a pretty violent person. So context, I could be a very violent person sometimes, just young, stupid guy, just, looking for a fight. Driving down the road. Now, since then, I've mellowed out over the time, but
Now
still
you
get
carry a
that
gun.
road. What's that?
Now you carry a gun.
Yeah, yeah. Now it's just road rage now, right? Cussing somebody out, cutting them off, F you, whatever, right? I'm getting on the road. I'm driving down the freeway in Georgia. A lot of batshit crazy drivers in Georgia. I love Georgia, but they're a special breed of crazy drivers. The ones that are crazy, they're a special breed of crazy. And I get so cut off so hard out of my blind spot by somebody. Like so I'm already speeding, doing about 70, 80. I get cut off so hard out of my blind side, my right side, by somebody doing maybe, I don't know, 120, 130.
Oh.
They do it so close that I had to slam on my brakes or their tail was going to 100% clip my nose, which is actually okay for me, especially since I was in a Saab and it's front heavy and their rear would have spun out and they probably bad things would have happened for them physically, right? So that happens. My car's swerving a little bit. They're going. My knee jerk, instant, like from a cellular level reaction, was to immediately say a prayer for their safety and the safety of everybody on the road. No road rage, no like, F you mother, you know what I mean? Which would have been like a total standard response. And I think most people would not blame me, I think, And as soon as I said that, I didn't even catch myself having that knee-jerk response, but it happened. And then literally I felt goosebumps crawl all over my body, noticing in myself the change that came so knee-jerk and instinctive. And that came from a very short, if you think about it in the lifetime of 20 plus years, this was when I was like 27, so 26, 27, 20, like 27, 28, right? So if you think about 27, 28 years of mental mindset built up, right, that was a little bit more angry, violent, whatever, to then get to within 90 days to be able to have that reaction in a circumstance where I would have wanted to act completely differently. That was just incredible. I don't know if that really resonates with anybody, but for me, knowing myself and then seeing the knee-jerk instinctive reaction so differently to who I normally am, I was like, wow, this is crazy. Like my mind has changed.
Well, let's take this and give it to real estate agents right now listening, because I think what I love about principles is they're agnostic. They apply all applications of it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so I might either remove the number 9 or add a number 10 to our list of career killers. But I would say, let's move this to number 9.
Okay.
And add in no gratitude practice.
As number 10?
We'll make it number 9, and I'll make number 10 the number 9, number 10 is that, what I heard you say, and let me try to translate it, is that gratitude practice, or I would say, I think the content was gratitude. The principle was consistency.
Yes.
And so I think you chose to do something consistently, and it transformed you. And I think that's what you and I talked about before we got on.
Yeah.
We had to wrap everything, even just like forget 9 career killers, just the one thing you need to know about life and success. We'll just condense everything into like one principle, which is what I think you just highlighted was a commitment to consistency for a certain period of time, which then gives you the opportunity to watch a transformation happen in your life. And so like, I think people I saw an interesting stat the other day is 34% of real estate agents are now in the millennial age. And so, those are people with 25, or I think millennials are 25 to 35 right now. Right. So, they've got that upbringing, but then you also have, I guess, the rest of the market, 2/3 above those ages. And so regardless of which, people are coming to the game with decades of life that has been a certain way, a certain mindset. And that I would say most people don't come from like a fertile real estate specific like mindset family.
Right.
And so there is a level of transformation and adaptation and growth that someone has to like plug into and change in order to to stay in the business. And so whether it's transforming, anger into gratitude, or fear into courage, or reluctance into, acceptance, right? I think, getting on the phone, talking, prospecting, whatever the transformation is, it doesn't happen. Again, that goes back to the number one thing on the real estate list here is false expectations, and giving yourself a long enough timeline. Is like what you did is you gave yourself those 90 days.
Yeah, I just said I was going to do this practice for 90 days. It was the miracle morning. And I was like, I'm just going to do it for 90 days. And if I don't feel anything from it, I have permission to quit on day 91.
There you go.
Right. But I was like, I'm going to do it for 90 days. I'm just going to do it. And I was in a place and space. I was actually funny. I was in a physical space where I could do it. I went to Middle Georgia to hang out with my brother for a while. And I was in a farmhouse out in the middle of the country, and I had very few distractions. And I wanted to actually get away from life for a while. Like there was some traumatic and dramatic things that had happened in my life, and I dealt with them, and then I just wanted to woosah for a minute. And so I kind of figuratively and literally went off into the woods. So to your point about physical space.
Yeah.
Right. And I was like, what am I going to do to try to be different, try to make a change? And I was like, I'm going to try this miracle morning thing. Because I've been hearing about it for years, heard about it on podcasts, heard about it on book. I'm going to try that. Because I like to read, I like to write. And I was like, that, and I like to exercise. I already had some of the things I like.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I was like, what the hell? I'll do it.
Yeah.
Give myself 90 days. And just weird. I lost 50 pounds.
Whoa.
Lost 50 pounds in those 90 days because I just got way more conscious about wanting to be healthy. Like these default things, like these dominoes started knocking over. They started knocking over. Actually, I listened to a podcast the other day by Gary John Bishop. He was interviewed by Mike Dillard, and I ordered his book immediately.
Yeah.
And I'm going to read it. One of the things that really stood out, and it says, get out of your head and into your life. But one of the things that he talks about is that, you have all these thoughts. You have all these thoughts. And for some reason, I feel like I need to talk about it right now, and it resonates, and it relates to what you're saying. You have all these thoughts in your head, like you're saying, agents, fears, right? Prospecting, it's harder than you think, whatever. And he goes, you have all these stories and thoughts. And I just heard it yesterday, literally. So this is going to take before yesterday. So I'm summarizing something I just recently heard, and I haven't even read the book yet. But he basically breaks down how he learned that you really are what you do, not what you think. And if you can learn to realize that you can live with your thoughts, but are not necessarily your thoughts, they do not control you. You can live with them. Focus on the doing. Focus on getting into your heart and out of your mind, the thinking, the fears, the whatever. And if you get into the doing and consistently do something, whether it's prospecting, whatever habit it is, if you get into your heart and do action, your thoughts have to change because your brain learns that the action did not bring you any bad things. Whereas your brain is wired to say, don't change anything. Don't do anything, because right now we're alive. Right now, nobody's killing us. There's no tigers. There's no lions. There's no bad people, caveman, survival, like your croc brain, your lizard brain, right? So I think whenever we try doing something new, the brain is like, oh, wait, hold up. What? We might die. I think, right? That's the lizard brain. That's what it goes to. That's the extreme version of what the lizard brain is designed to protect you from. Dude, don't do anything different. Don't rock the boat, because then you won't die, because we're not dead right now. And so I think like even prospecting, anything is like, that's where the fear, I think that's ultimately, from my understanding research, that's where the fear comes from. And like what he was explaining in the podcast interview, and that's actually, I discovered a lot of my authors is by listening to podcasts. I'm like, I got to read that person's book.
Yeah.
Read that is like, get into the doing, because that's heart centered.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was listening to his podcast and I was thinking back to when I did my miracle morning, I just started doing so many different things that were heart led. And I was like, I don't know if I'm going to lose this weight. And I was unhappy with my physical weight at the time. Right. But I was like, you know what? I'm doing the miracle morning. I can add these little things that I'm doing. And it started little by little. First, it was drinking a gallon of water a day and eating 30 grams of protein of breakfast in the morning, because I knew that was a principle that I heard from Tim Ferriss. So I was like, I make scrambled eggs and drink a gallon of water a day. Then it turned into cutting out some bad things. Then it turned into a 20-minute workout. All I had to do was go outside, run to the end of the farm dirt road, and run back. That's all I had to do. That's what I said from myself. If I just do that, win. Dude, 90 days later, I got a visible six-pack. Like just crazy, you know? But
Yeah.
it came to where I just had to keep letting go of thoughts, fears, and just getting into my heart and doing. Getting into your heart will allow you to do things. It'll allow you to do that. If you're in your head, it'll keep you from it.
Yeah.
But by doing, and like you're saying in your principal points, right? Like when you start doing things, creating a physical space, doing your scripts and practicing. If you don't have a routine, people who don't have a routine quit the business. You're number two, right?
Yep.
If you just stick to those routines, the act transforms you. Right?
Absolutely.
Whether it's the physical
Absolutely.
morning, the 20-minute workouts, the practice of prospecting, sending out a thank you gift, sending out 3 handwritten notes to your sphere of influence, whatever it is, right? The act of doing, if you do it consistently, will by default, it's science, cause and effect. It will literally transform your DNA at a cellular level. I went from being a baseball toting road rager to praying for people not to crash. I know it's silly, but also I think it makes it easy to see that distinction, right? Angry guy with a baseball bat prays for people to not get hurt. That's a pretty big leap from my perspective. Same thing, prospecting, everything you're describing, I think is juice. Everything you're describing is so on point. And I just think if people take action around it and just, like you said, like your 121 days of running, it's this consistency, sticking to it that changes you. That's what I believe. That's what I see. It changes you. And then when you experience the change and get the positive, now your brain loves that. And it's not fearful of it. There's no fearful thoughts around it anymore because it sees a bunch of good things coming out of it. And now you can do it without fear, right? Or with less resistance.
That's the word right there. And I mean, I would say, I'm gonna play with what you just said and try to package it into like, I guess the whole concept we're playing with here is,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, so if the principle, I think the overarching principle is this consistency and the commitment to it. And no matter what you choose, whatever the action or the verb is, it will transform you through that process. And so
Mm-hmm.
I now am a runner. Why am I now a runner? Because I run.
Right.
I
Right.
am now a successful agent because I have ran the phones for 121 days. And
Right.
I would say two things before moving on to kind of some of the last things I have written down here would be a challenge, I think, for people at the end of this. I think if I could give anything to anybody at the end of this, and I've been starting to build these into some of our posts, is that just like a blog post, you can read it, you can listen to it because we do it in like audiobook style too, and you can feel great at the end of it like a conference. But if there's not a challenge to apply it, then the results are fleeting, meaning you can feel good, but you're actually not going to get it. You can't think about working out at the gym and increase your muscle mass. You can't think about, like you're saying, it's about the doing. You can't think about becoming a better runner and, tomorrow run a half marathon.
Mm-hmm.
Same thing with prospecting. You can't just buy the leads from RedX, pick up the phone once and then go back to expectations and expect to have the listing appointments all ready and done for you. And
Right.
so it is the transformation through commitment and consistency that gives you the results. We give you the leads. RedX gives you you can get the scripts, you can get the leads and scripts and all that stuff anywhere. It's up to you. I think that level of ownership, it is up to you to make that decision every day and give yourself a fair enough timeline. Like you said, this is right for me. And I need to give it enough time to figure out if it's going to work. And like I talked about before, 90 days, I think, is essentially like, that's what I saw. I don't know if it's a universal human experience where if you commit to something for 90 days, that's the thing that you become. But it was at the 100-day mark, which is essentially 90 days, that people started really cheering for me. I felt like I owned and won something, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I've seen in real estate people sticking with, when we hire people, it's under a 90-day probationary period, right? Most jobs have like, hey, 90 days, evaluate, is this the right fit? Like something human elemental about 90 days it takes to like, say, is this right for you? And I think until you make that commitment and wholeheartedly say, I'm going to try this without, that judgment, that fear, that criticism, or at least encounter that judgment and criticism. And then, like you said, just don't think about it, do it. And then, I'll plug another blog post that we're coming out with, which is about fear. And it was based a lot on the book called Feel the Fear and Do It Anyways. And I think I can't really say it any more concisely than that, is like, challenge yourself for a certain period of time, commit to it, and feel the fear and do it anyways. Because, I can talk about running, prospecting, all the different verbs, INGs. It just, it doesn't matter. It's just the application of that principle overall.
Awesome. And number 10?
Number 10, I'll just wrap up by saying choosing the right lead type. I think there's certain skill sets that require, that create success for different lead types. I know about our lead types, and which are popular lead types. You can get a lot of places. But expireds require a certain personality. People who are really good at expireds, for whatever reason, sometimes aren't as good at for sale by owners, and vice versa, and the nuances and the timing and the frustrations and kind of the feedback and objections are all different. We have a GeoLeads product that lets you drop a pin on a neighborhood, and if you want to do open houses, you can build an open house like massive campaign for talking to those people and doing just as it just sold, and that seems to be like a good entry level point, because there's a lot less pressure and stress. It just kind of gets you on the phone, right? Like, getting to the gym is the hard part.
Mm-hmm.
So like just getting on the phone. So if you on the other end, just picking up the phone, just a habit of that alone, even if you don't talk to anybody, just picking up the phone, and dialing, like in and of itself, I think that habit. And so GeoLeads is one of those. Again, just knowing the lead types and making sure you're asking the right questions, and if the company or service that you're looking at is being honest. I don't know if I want to say there are dishonest companies. I don't know. I don't try to buy leads on a day-to-day basis. I just know that what I would want, and one thing I would love to create, is like a guide to choosing the right lead types for you based on your skills, personality type. And I would also say effectiveness, because we know expireds are super effective because they're people who've already said, I want to sell and haven't, but also we know like 50 agents are calling them, and like you're going to deal with a lot of competition. And so that means your skill needs to be different. And so, I just think that it would be unfortunate, and this is the reason why agents fail out, is I think they go to a conference or they hear someone say they're working a certain type of lead, and then they immediately, Google that lead type. They call the 3 different companies, and whatever salesperson they talk to makes the best sounding case, they go and buy that lead type. They've already come to a pre-drawn conclusion about what's right for them. And then they go to talk to a salesperson who obviously wants to sell them the thing that they're talking about.
Right.
So they're not going to talk them out of it. And so just my fear and my suggestion is to really understand the lead type before you call it, because I think the most unfortunate thing that could happen is like someone has like the willingness and eagerness, and like that first encounter that's negative, trying a lead type, say, oh, that's just not for me. And it just shuts them down. And so the whole category of prospecting or cold calling or whatever you want to call it has a negative emotion associated with it, which then discounts the value of that for them forever. When in reality, if they would have known how to look at the right lead type and start and get that muscle memory built for confidence, they could expand into more difficult ones. And prospecting can be, which I didn't get to mention this, like people ultimately in real estate, this is the buzzword, every single platform and company wants to sell this because agents want a predictable, consistent source of income, right?
Mm-hmm.
Everybody, but that's, everywhere you go, that's what everybody wants to sell you. But again, it goes back to the agent themselves, who has to have the confidence and consistency, because like I said before, I didn't get to say before, is what do I write down here? I just made sure this. How do you expect to have consistent results without consistent behavior? And so I just want to make sure that with that principle combined with choosing the right lead type for that person, for where they are in their stage of business, like those two things aligned will equal success. And without it, there are hundreds of agents who cancel RedX because, they had misinterpretations of what was right for them.
Right.
They came to the table with pre-drawn conclusions. And then again, I want to put this all back on the agent, because it's up to them to take ownership, right? Like the way it's caveat emptor, not that there are unscrupulous people out there, but you have to take ownership over your agency. And that means
Yourself first and
yourself.
foremost.
Yeah. So that really wraps it all up. I mean, we've got a good hour and a half here of
Yeah.
principles and
Boom. I love it.
yeah.
You got me going too. Congratulations. You got me jazzed up and on a monologue once or twice there. Definitely that one time right there at the end.
I love that stuff.
You got me monologuing.
Yeah.
I do agree that what we're talking about is fractal. Fractal meaning principle based. Zoom in, zoom out. You can zoom this into, you could literally look at brushing something as tactical and small as brushing your teeth or making your bed.
Oh gosh. Yeah.
Or you can zoom it out to, making 150 calls a day and knowing that 150 calls will get you to one executed contract within 6 months. There's your formula, rock and roll. That's Jeff's formula, Jeff Cohn's formula, right?
Yeah,
That's not every agent, but I'm just saying it's fractal. Zoom out, zoom in. It's principles. And I love what you're saying, 9 career killers. It's like, if you follow these principles, I think it'd be hard not to succeed. Right? Yeah. By default, if you just stick to it long enough for the momentum, for the flywheel effect to kick in, right? To get that wheel moving. Once it's moving, the amount of effort that it takes to move it along is fractional compared to what it took to get off the ground. Because by then, all your habits, if you're sticking to these habits, your habits are easier now, right? Like I bet it's a lot easier for you to run. Ironically, I bet it's a lot easier for you to go run today at day 121 than it was at day 1, 5, 10, or 15.
Absolutely.
You see what I'm saying? Even though you've run more days, it actually got easier.
It gets easier. And then the level of difficulty I'm willing to encounter goes up because the challenge of doing what previously was 2 miles, 3 miles, 4 miles has gone down. The same thing with prospecting, right? The same thing with objection, right? It's just like I've encountered enough resistance and broken through it enough times. And it's not that I wake up every day and it's completely gone, but like we talked about before, is I feel the pain, I feel the fear, I feel the anxiety, I feel the resistance, and I just do it anyways. And again, that's my version through the lens of running, but that's essentially what every single top prospector does too, is they feel the pain, feel the objections, feel the rejection, and they still pick up the phone and they do it anyways.
That's one of the gifts that we have as human beings, is that we're creatures of adaptation. We are by default creatures of adaptation, unconsciously, even at an unconscious, subconscious level, we're creatures of adaptation. So you don't even have to think, like, you don't have to think about your heart pumping right now. You don't have to think about being a creature of adaptation. You are a creature of adaptation. That's an advantage and a gift that we're given as like a power as humans. And so when we think about, like, this is what I didn't realize till I started doing things for 90 days, 100 days, right, in my own life. Like I did this lifting program for 18 months. Is like, sure, the weight gets harder because you challenge yourself, but the act of doing it gets easier because you've adapted to it. So it's this ironic relationship, weird relationship, where it's actually harder day 1, 5, 10, 15. What happens is because of our adaptation DNA, right? We just start adapting. Your brain's like, all right, well, I guess this nonsense is going to keep up. He's going to keep doing this shit. So I guess we're just going to have to make it easier now because we're not getting to not do it, right?
Right.
So then your body, mind, whatever, starts to adapt to making it easier, and that applies to prospecting, anything to do with business. Period. It just gets easier.
Yeah,
if you stick to it long enough, consistency. That's what the point I was trying to make is. Fractal, zoom in, zoom out. If you know your numbers, like you're saying, you have the realistic expectations, you have the right routines and habits. At that point, the only game that you truly, like, once you have the formula mapped out, right? Like maybe like these 9 habits, right? These 9 principles, know your numbers, things like that. Once you have the blueprint mapped out, the only one thing, correct me if you think I'm wrong, the only one thing at that point that you need to focus on to make your success inevitable, not if, but when, is just consistently sticking to it day in and day out for just long enough to get the momentum going.
Absolutely. That's it.
Once the momentum's going, you'll be addicted to it and it will pull you along.
I wish there was a way to, like, for people to listen to this whole conversation in reverse and start with that, right? If you could, like, it's only like fruits at the end. You're like, oh yeah, boom. It's just, and like, but to start from the beginning and for it to have the same amount of gravity that you just nailed it on, I would just like, that's it.
Yeah. Map out the plan. Know that you're working with the right principles by, like, with what Justin has shared with you guys, by modeling those already successful. Like Tony Robbins says, just find those who already have the success you want and model them. Justin has 9 principles for you guys 10 now, 10 principles that you can model that are the common denominators for the most successful in the industry and the most consistently successful in the industry. Once you map these out and write them down for yourself, then you only have to do one thing, literally one thing. That's kind of liberating, actually, I think. You only have to do one thing every day. Wake up and be consistent with the plan. That's it. Now, do it long enough and you'll go from being angry to saying prayers of blessing for people, and you'll go from hating running to being a runner. And
I mean, we've got to wrap this up, but I can't help myself to keep keep simplifying and simplifying and simplifying. That's like where we're at right now. It's like, how much can we take all that and keep it smaller? And so I'd say, like, for me, it's all you got to do is put your shoes on, right? It comes down to essentially put your shoes on. For real estate agents, it's pick up the phone, right? There's essentially, it comes down to one singular core action that represents the entire thing. And so that right. And so all we talk about is prospecting and running. And so, but I'm sure, like, I want other people to look into their lives and say, well, where else can I apply this? And so there's going to be, like, turn on the stove, or, drink the glass of water, or I don't know, jump in the pool. Right. All I got to do, right. Just that one thing that's like, that's it. If I can just get there and do that, everything else falls into place.
Love it. Justin, thank you so much for this, my man.
Yeah, you're welcome. I enjoyed this.
This has been a surprisingly focused yet broad. How do I want to say it? It's been a surprisingly philosophical. There's been a surprisingly philosophical conversation, considering the tactical bullet points that we covered. This has been both very philosophical and tactical. Absolutely love it. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Thanks for putting this on for everybody. I mean, I know how much energy and effort and time that you've poured into finding all the people to do this. It is no small task. And so I think people might take for granted the ease of access to all this information. That's what you've provided. And so I just know the enormous amount of input and output that you've put into this to give everybody access to these ideas. And so I just want to say thank you to you, because it's truly a gift that you're giving the industry. And I really hope it helps dozens, hundreds of agents. And in some way, I know it's going to come back to you. And so, yeah, just want to say thank you to you for all this.
I really appreciate that acknowledgement. That really sincerely means a lot.
Yeah. You're welcome.
Thank you. It is a lot of work. Guys, you can go check out more about Justin and follow him and his content at the blog on the blog at the Red X. So just go to theredx.com, and you can see a link there to the blog, or you can go to theredx.com/blog. Also, I've linked to it below this video. So just go ahead and click on the link if you're watching. Go check that out. I would subscribe to them. They when Justin and I were introduced through Greg McDaniel, and then before I got a chance to speak with Justin for the first time, I checked out the blog, and I think it's, sincerely, in my opinion, for what it's worth, I think it's one of the best blogs out there in real estate right now. Very actionable, and very relevant to today's market conditions and industry and consumer behavior. So if I were you, I would avail yourself of that really awesome and free resource. And this is exactly what Justin does, is he goes about dissecting and taking apart what works and putting it back together in an into an easy to understand, simple to implement process for you guys, and puts it into the blog. Enjoy. Justin, thank you so much.
You're welcome.